Hey everyone, this is MNL2, and today in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at some of the best hypercoasters around the United States. For the purposes of this video, I'm only going to be looking at hypercoasters that fit the super traditional standard definition of a hypercoaster. So technically, a hypercoaster is a roller coaster that is taller than or has a drop length between 200 feet and 300 feet, meaning technically coasters like Steel Vengeance, Accelerator, or even X2 could classify as a hypercoaster. But for this video, I'm only going to include coasters that also only have a single lift hill and no inversions. Anyways, keep in mind that this video is solely based on my own personal experiences, and these rankings are just my honest opinions. One final thing, Orion will not be on this list because Orion is a giga coaster, whether you like it or not. Anyways, if you find yourself enjoying any of my videos, then please consider subscribing down below. Oh, and also totally join my Discord server, link in description. I promise it'll be worth it. Thank you. Starting things off, we have Superman Ride of Steel at Six Flags America. Now this coaster wasn't particularly bad, but I wouldn't say it's amazing either. Also, before I go any further with this coaster, I want to mention that generally, the things I look for and love about a standard hypercoaster are its effective usage of height and speed, emphasis on effective, a great first drop, good ride duration, good amounts and quality of airtime, aggression, and intensity. So of all these things, Ride of Steel kind of just achieves bare minimum with all of these qualities that I look for. I admit that it does have a good first drop, especially in the back, but apart from that, it only has a few moments of good airtime, particularly in that series of small bunny hills at the end. It definitely has a fair share of intensity, as that first double helix definitely caused me to gray out. Aside from that, this ride really lacks the aggression and relentless ride experience that I look for. The super long straight sections of track are just beyond my comprehension, honestly. Like, come on. I would understand if it was Golden Horse that designed this ride, but seriously, Intamin, this coaster was made by the same company that gave us Velocicoaster. Heading over to Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, we have probably the tamest and most relaxing hypercoaster I've ridden, Apollo's Chariot. Now, I don't want to imply that this is a bad ride, because honestly, it is an amazing coaster. The thing with B&M Hypers is that most of them really aren't intense or aggressive at all, but they do a great job at delivering airtime, first drops, having a solid ride duration, and effectively using its height and speed. Anyways, of all the B&M hypercoasters I've been on, Apollo's Chariot does have the weakest airtime and feels the least intense. Now that could just be because this was B&M's first hypercoaster, but either way, this ride is still super fun and relaxing, but not exactly the most exciting or exhilarating. Candemonium at Hersheypark is another B&M hyper, and I don't want to spend too much time on this coaster because I very recently uploaded a 60-second review of this coaster. So to sum up the qualities of this ride, it has some really strong airtime moments, but just very few in quantity. It's super aesthetically pleasing, and I really love the name and the theme. This was also my 100th roller coaster, so it definitely has some substantial value to me as well. But other than that, I think the biggest flaw with this coaster is its duration and the amount of overall elements. It's a very short out and back, not that that's a bad thing, but hey, at least it's an amazing out and back. Unlike a certain double out and back that I know. Anyways, Candemonium is super fun, but super short. Heading over to America's Rock and Roller Coaster, we have Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point, the jankiest and quirkiest hypercoaster to appear on this list. Now, I immediately want to give this ride credit for being the first ever hypercoaster and for kickstarting the Coaster Wars, because this roller coaster is a true legend. Now, number 7 might seem pretty low on this list, but I want to assure you that I absolutely love this coaster, and I don't really have much bad to say about it. Sure, it's not going to be the smoothest or most comfortable ride, but the strangely profiled infamous triangular hills on this coaster are just so godly, specifically referring to the final series of consecutive airtime hills. They're just so aggressive and fun, it's amazing. Apart from that, it has a pretty good first drop and also a very long and interesting ride layout. Admittedly, the turnaround thingy halfway through the ride was honestly not executed great and was fairly discomforting, but everything else was easily manageable, and I don't think that this ride was so rough to be considered a bad ride. The profiling is definitely jank, but in my eyes, it just makes this ride even more unique and legendary. Next, we have Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. This is yet another B&M hyper, but unlike the rest of the B&M hypers, this one is actually fairly intense. This ride has a great selection of airtime moments offering super sustained floater airtime, but when it comes to intensity, this ride features a very powerful upwards helix in the middle of the ride. This upwards helix is so intense that it actually managed to make me gray out more than... Come on, don't do it. It's not worth it. Just change the subject. Think of the children. It made me gray out more than Intimidator 305's first turn. Anyways, especially for a B&M hypercoaster, this helix delivers preposterous amounts of positive G-forces. That's a pretty cool word. Preposterous. DM me the word preposterous on Discord to earn 5 points on my Discord server. Anyways, Nitro is definitely a super amazing hypercoaster, but when looking at airtime, this ride doesn't exactly match up with the following coasters on this list. Intimidator at Carowinds, another B&M Hyper, is notoriously known for trimming quite hard, and I have to agree with this assessment. When I rode Intimidator in the cold, pouring rain, I'm pretty sure the trims were either turned off or super reduced because it didn't feel like it was slowing down at all. It hauled over its enormous camelbacks, giving phenomenal sustained floater airtime and rushing speed sensations. However, when I later rode Intimidator in dry heat, the trims were much more evident, and the trimmed camelbacks lost so much of their power. I had originally had this ride ranked higher than the other Cedar Fair Intamin coaster, but then after experiencing the curse of Intimidator, it immediately dropped several rankings. You win this time, I-305. Nonetheless, I still want to take those fantastic rides that I had on it into consideration, and even with the excessive trimming, the first half of the ride still remained legendary. So this is why I have this coaster ranked at number 5. Coming in with one of the most underrated and possibly controversial placements on this list, Steel Force at Dorney Park is a true masterpiece. I also have a 60-second review of this coaster if you want to hear me quickly analyze the layout, but essentially, this coaster literally just feels like Magnum XL 200, but comfortable and not janky. Stanley has great sustained floater airtime, a great first drop, an awesome helix, and a fantastic series of returning bunny hills. The occasional head choppers on this ride are also amazing. Like I said, I know this is going to be a controversial placement because a lot of people say that they don't get any airtime on this ride and that it's very boring, but I genuinely love this coaster and I thought it was a great hyper coaster. Mako at SeaWorld Orlando is widely considered to be one of the best hypercoasters period, and I have to agree with that to an extent. I admit that this is quite an amazing B&M hyper, but not by a huge margin. Like after my very first ride on Mako, I initially had it ranked under Intimidator at Carowinds, but as I got more rides on it and tried out some different seats and stuff, it rose up to my number 3 spot. This coaster offers great airtime, one of the moments being a very notable speed hill, an awesome first drop, great ride duration, an awesome setting as it borders a pretty sizable lake, and a cool theme and color scheme. It even has a cinematic soundtrack that plays as you ascend its pretty speedy lift hill. As much as I loved this coaster, I wouldn't consider it to be the absolute best B&M hyper ever, but this is one of the greater ones. This might also be a controversial pick, but hear me out. Basically, take everything I said about Mako, amplify it, and apply it to Diamondback. Of all the B&M hypercoasters I've been on, Diamondback has the most defined and strongest airtime. Now, to be fair, I have only ridden this ride in the cold rain and never in the dry sun. And just like Intimidator in the rain, this ride felt like it was completely hauling with no trims. So when I eventually get back to Kings Island, hopefully I can experience this ride in clear weather conditions, but until then, my opinion is based on my 10 total rides on this beast. Wrong, Kings Island coaster. All of which in the pouring rain. The camelbacks are absurd, the pacing is great, the setting is super secluded as it sends you deep into the forest, and it all concludes with a visually stunning splashdown, all while operating with great 3 train ops. Overall, the only thing that this ride lacks is the aggression and intensity aspect, which leads me to the number 1 hypercoaster I've been on, which manages to combine extreme airtime, a great first drop, intensity, aggression, all that good stuff into one extraordinary experience. Heading back over to Hersheypark, we have the superior hypercoaster Skyrush, the 4th coaster on this list that I have done a 60-second review for. This ride can best be described as an RMC hybrid, but in an Intamin hypercoaster form. Each and every airtime hill on this ride is ferocious ejector. The transitions are snappier than Sarah Anderson's replies to Coaster Studios' criticisms on Twitter. The first drop is steeper and sharper than the declining stocks of Six Flags. The level of intensity and aggression you get from this roller coaster is just incredible. It uses every foot of track super effectively with not a single dry moment. Even the lift hill is like stupid fast, completely yeeting you up and over the top. The only criticism I can find with this ride is, I guess, the restraints. I mean, me personally, I didn't have the slightest problem with them at all, but a lot of people find them really uncomfortable and painful, but like, get good. In conclusion, Skyrush is hands down the absolute greatest hypercoaster I've ever ridden. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Keep in mind that this list is solely based on my own personal opinions, and I fully understand that some of you may completely disagree with anything or literally everything on this list. So if that's the case, then feel free to comment down below what your absolute favorite traditional hypercoaster is. Anyways, if you did end up enjoying the video, then please remember to leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you will be alerted whenever I upload a new video. But until then, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.